So, hey guys, today we have Salman with us. He is going to be joining as a program manager at Microsoft, and he has been program manager intern at Microsoft. He has also been a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. So, welcome, Salman, to our channel, and thanks a lot for coming. And if you want to briefly introduce yourselves, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Joban. It's really nice to meet all of you. I'm honored to be here, to be honest with you. So I hope this is going to be really insightful and that I can offer some useful advice to all the students or like professionals out there. Yeah.
Sure, sure, thanks. So, Salman, my first question would be if you can briefly talk about your journey so far leading up to uh, a program manager offer for Microsoft. If you can briefly summarize your journey as a whole.
Yeah, sure. So university, after first year,
Hmm.
I sort of talk about this in like when I talk about how did I get my first ever like Microsoft internship. I sort of talk about okay,
Mhm.
after first year, what I tried to do was get any sort of job, like any
Hmm.
tech job. So I went into software engineering first, as most I guess computer science students do, and then through software engineering, I thought, okay, this is great. Um, I'll do more software engineering. So I ended up doing like data analytics as well, but like
Hmm.
data science, software engineering. But then after second year, I ended up like looking into other sort of roles. So I think as a computer science student, typically you would think that, the only sort of roles out there are software engineering roles.
Yeah.
And that's what I sort of thought. But then I saw this like opening in Microsoft for like customer facing roles, which were like cloud solution architecture things, um, technical specialist. And
Hmm.
these things sort of fit into Microsoft's global sales and marketing organization.
Mhm.
So it's more of the salesy roles, but they're still technical, right? So cloud stuff is like Azure.
Okay.
Um, so that was the next step I went through. So I went into the Microsoft one. I was a bit hesitant as to whether I should just go for another software
Hmm.
engineering role from some
Mhm.
other company or go for this one. But when I got the offer, I was sort of like, okay, well, I can't turn this down. And yeah, so I took that. Um, and then the surprising thing was when I got into Microsoft, it was like you have so much flexibility to do whatever you want in
Yeah.
like because you have time to learn, you have time to do your own core role, you have time to, talk to other people.
Hmm.
And I think what happened was I started to realize like I do like the role. I really like the customer engagement because we're
Hmm.
working. So just a brief description. So for cloud solution architecture, you're basically helping customers outside of Microsoft
Okay.
use Azure, right? So you could think of your local supermarket or some big organizations, perhaps in India. How are they going to keep afloat during COVID without
Hmm.
having, say, a server office
Mhm.
setup? Perhaps they need some cloud stuff, right? Um, so they could use, for example, Azure's web servers or databases,
Mhm.
things to host their infrastructure, even artificial intelligence
Okay.
APIs and stuff, right? So that was like helping organizations use that. And
Hmm.
that would perhaps be like through demos, coding stuff up, showing them that, um, helping them get through roadblocks, hosting events for them and talks and stuff like that. And I really did enjoy that customer facing thing where you got to speak to the end users.
Hmm.
Um, what I perhaps missed was the way I sort of like to think about it is what part of the puzzle are you affecting or what part of
Hmm.
the fire are you affecting, right? So as a cloud solution architecture, as a cloud solution architect, right, you're bringing people to the fire,
Hmm.
right? But as a program manager or software engineer, you're keeping the fire alight, like
Yeah.
you're building the fire. So I really like the idea of talking to customers, but I sort of miss
Mhm.
the ability to know the product inside out,
Yeah.
because as cloud solution architects, you sort of know perhaps like 50 different products or
Hmm.
200, but perhaps not so much one in all the detail. So you would get feedback from customers, but then I would like to take that feedback to product teams perhaps and be like, okay, so this is something that needs to be changed, or something that could be improved based on the customer's feedback. But obviously, you know, talking to the teams, it depends how you deliver your message. So yeah, I really liked the idea of affecting products from a direct point of view, and then like also interacting with customers. So program management, I think, is where it sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of the mix. Yeah.
Okay.
That was it. And so I did that internship, and then so that was 12 months, and then 3 months program management, and then based off that, I guess you get an offer or not. And yeah, that was my journey. Sorry if that was a bit long.
No,
But
I
that
think
was
it totally makes sense. And so I think a basic question would be, a lot of students would love to know about, is what a program manager do exactly. And as you said, like program manager has a role of facing the customers as well as getting into the technical details. So if you can elaborate a bit on that, like what a program manager do and how, what are the basic roles of a program manager?
Yes. Okay. So in terms of program management at Microsoft, in comparison to other companies, you perhaps could think of it as like a product manager.
Okay.
Right. So a product manager at Google, Facebook, Amazon, the similar sort of role you perhaps would have in Microsoft can be categorized as a program manager. And program manager, some people I think like to describe program as a lot of products.
Yeah.
Some people might just refer to it as program, which covers both, for example, community programs, but also product programs.
Okay.
So if we just refer to it as product management or program management, it doesn't really so much matter, but essentially like you have products, right, as a company. So for example, we could have Microsoft Teams, right? And Microsoft Teams, for example, it gets released, but how do the new features come out? How do the roadmaps and the strategies around, okay, what's next for the product? How do we take customer feedback and evolve the product? How do we fix bugs? How do we know what needs to be focused on by the software engineers and the managers, etc.? How do these things get decided? You know, a lot of that can be sort of offloaded onto the program managers, if that makes sense. I think there perhaps are lots of people out there who are software engineers who perhaps don't like the idea of program managers because they might think they do nothing, but they perhaps do a lot of the stuff that the software engineers don't want to do. So that's one way of thinking about it. For example, if we need to go to meetings to figure out stuff and put stuff on the agenda, or to make sure there's priority here from higher up, so that software engineers can do the work that they want to do and stuff like that. It's a lot of, as you may be able to tell, it's a lot of things which are not always set in stone, right? So it can vary so much, like especially depending on the type of product and where it is in the life cycle. So like for us, we've worked on like Microsoft Teams, Skype, Azure Communication Services sort of things, I guess, right? So that is more of a thing which is already out there. But if we are perhaps a PM in a startup, or a PM creating a whole new product at Microsoft, it could be like, okay, let's start with the ideation, the research, the sort of things you would do in a hackathon.
Okay.
And that's what I would sort of align it with. If a student was to envision what is the closest thing they can do, which is towards doing what a PM does, is if you go to a hackathon, you start with the ideation process, you choose what am I going to prioritize as these features, what is my customer looking for, what target audience am I looking for, and what would fulfill their needs. And that's, I think, the closest you would perhaps get. Or if you go into a startup, because you tend to sort of have those discussions, whatever role you're in. Yeah.
I think it makes sense. I think from my point of view, a PM provides a different aspect to a product. Uh, Rather than like a technical aspect, there is also some customer needs that needs to be bridged, and the gap, a PM, I would say, is a bridge between the customer and the developers, and for the back and forth communication.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
my next question would be, I think you have a great background in the open source community as well. And how do you think like a student should start open source? And if you can break down into some steps a student can follow to start contributing to open source projects on GitHub or other open source platforms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that compliment. So yeah, so open source. Okay, so one of the things I sort of thought about with open source, so my journey with open source started before I joined Microsoft. So this was like first year, second year, sort of like summer of first year, I think going into second year. And that was like like 6 months before I got my internship offer. And the whole idea with that was I wanted to sort of try what it's like to work at Microsoft without working there, if that makes sense. Because I
Yeah,
was like I still am like a huge Microsoft fanboy. So it was like, okay, will I like to actually work there or compared to do like me liking the products and stuff? And that was still another conversation like as to whether I would enjoy actually working there as an intern.
yeah.
So I wanted a way, I don't know if it's solely that, but that's one of the benefits. I think I sort of realized that, okay, perhaps later on I realized, okay, this is what it's like for me to work there. But so I basically found this project which aligned with what I was interested in developing my own skill sets in. So it was the XAML community toolkit, basically. So it's like Microsoft has this like UI sort of layer and they have their .NET background, but on Windows you have like UWP apps, and I know loads of people might say UWP is dead, but like, at the time it definitely wasn't, right? And they had this like WinUI layer, and in order to like create your UI components, you use this thing called XAML, and that this community toolkit was basically an app which people could see the new Windows UI features and stuff, and how you could then take those and then you could use components from these and put them inside apps.
Okay.
And then those could be developed into store apps, etc. So I started contributing to that because I met this person at this sort of like after talk at an event. So I saw this person at like this Windows Insider event. He was delivering a talk on what was it on? It was on the Graph Explorer. Do you know the Microsoft
Yeah,
Graph Explorer? So it's like the
exactly.
API sort of
Yeah.
endpoints. Yeah, so I spoke with him after, and he, I think I followed him on Twitter or something. I eventually found out that there was this project, and I sort of started contributing. So then through that, it was literally like step by step. So like how I got started was literally like the smallest things. I think I started with literally documentation and MD files. So I tried to get really familiar with what is this project about and what can I sort of impact. And then as time went on, I think how I decided, okay, this is something I can change was by looking into the issues. So with GitHub, you have the pull request, but you also have issues. So it's things which people want, or there's problems in the app. So these are things that need to be solved. So I would look through a bunch of the pull requests and I would see, okay, so this is how they're making their pull request. This is how I understand their code base. Okay, so can I make any changes as well? Okay, here's some issues, perhaps I can work on these issues. So I then got involved with like talking in the threads for the issues. And then, you know, it's surprising because there's so many issues out there which just people don't have the time to solve. And you would think that, you know, there's an abundance of people in the world. There's always going to be someone solving an issue, but not always, right? So
Yeah.
perhaps I'd be like, okay, I'll try this out. And I wasn't always successful with things. There's literally, I think, still a issue or PR, which it's now gone into draft mode because it was so close, but it wasn't exactly the solution, which there was a problem with the UI layer, I think, itself. So my solution was a hack around. So that's still in draft mode from like years ago, I think. But like through trial and error, you start to get better at it. And like simple things here and there, you could literally change a text box into a drop-down box. And that was one of the things I did. And it's a PR, and it's like your first ever one you get, it's like, whoa. And then you get the little box saying, like showing that on your profile that you've contributed to Microsoft, and that's a cool feeling, especially like doing it for the first time. So that was sort of my journey, and then through that I wanted to start doing more open source with the community, so like creating my own projects, but mainly got started with doing something which I sort of already was interested in, and thought, okay, because I have the skill sets here, how can I apply it into this other project? Because I think one of the problems is with thinking about open source is choosing the most flashy project. For example, like going into go straight into Flutter or something, or going straight deep into .NET, things which have been there like forever.
Yeah.
But then if you don't understand the basics to it, then it's very hard to understand how to create a contribution. So things, I think, front-end stuff to start off with perhaps are a bit easier because you see that direct change happening in front of you when you compile an app. And then once you get used to that, then yeah, or the power to you, you can go into like more complex stuff. But I think that becomes more overwhelming to start off with. Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah.
And I would say, like, I know like you have a impressive array of Microsoft certifications, and you are also a Microsoft certified trainer. So my question would be like, how this certification can help a student get a highlight in a crowded job market, and how a student can benefit from these certifications.
Yes, unfortunately, this certification topic is quite controversial among students and even professionals. And obviously, like, if we are to objectively think about it, certificates are good. Like, objectively speaking, they're good. Like, it's like saying learning maths is rubbish because you won't be doing maths in the future. Like, learning anything is good. Okay, so I want to first say that. And then, okay, so like the MCT stuff, like that's something students, they can get paid for. Like you teach for like a day, you get paid for a day, and like you can set your own rates. So you're literally like your own business at in some capacity. You do that. So that's one thing. That's how you can get some sort of side income, is literally learning some certificates, and then once you get to a certain level, you can eventually become a Microsoft certified trainer. And that's one way. Okay. If you want to go into the traditional like tech sector and not just do training, then like using these certificates for like data engineer roles, cloud solution architecture roles, things like that, they're very helpful because you'll see some job postings which will say preferred certificates, and they will list the certificates they want. Unfortunately, I think it's challenging as a student to have to pay for all of these. But the main thing is that if you understand it, you don't even have to do the certificate things. If you understand it, it will help a lot in the job role. So like once I was in Microsoft, I started doing more of them, because like I don't know if you felt this at all when because you also interned, right? But like imposter syndrome. So like I was coming in, there was like people 15 years experience, 10 years, and I was there's so much that they just know off the top of their head, and how am I gonna like learn it as well? I wasn't just gonna ask one of them to teach me everything they know. It's like they don't have the time for that. Um, they might, but like the best way is for me to learn it myself. And
Yeah.
okay, whilst I could read all the documentation in the world, like go through Microsoft Docs, it's great. I think it's better if I follow a course which is structured, and that's where these certifications come in. So it's like, okay, well, there's a course for me to learn the specific things which are role-based, because they're now considered role-based certifications. So like role-based things, I go through a structured course. Then if I want to check if I know my knowledge, I do a certificate. And then whether I pass, whether I fail, that's based off whether I've learned it well enough. And the nice thing about that is, for example, if I was to learn, so one thing I tried to do was the periodic table. I tried to learn that when I was younger. So I ended up like going through this thing where I had to recite it in class and stuff. But now, like since then, I haven't like remembered it because I haven't tried to test myself again and again.
Yeah.
So with the certificates, there's this whole thing where you need to renew them as well. So it means that in the future, you need to still keep your knowledge up to date. And it's like a goal to achieve and it's to strive for. So I think that to me is like the nice thing about them. And then on top, yeah, you can start training with them, and then you can also like, it helps your CV. Yeah, like people, it's one of those things where it's like people search for people with these keywords perhaps, and then if your profile has if you think about HR, and if you see the job postings which literally say you need these certificates, if they search on LinkedIn this certificate and they have it on their profile, then it's like it's literally a like keyword sort of search engine optimization thing. But again, like you don't have to have them, especially if it's like software engineering and program management. I think those jobs don't need it. It was more akin, I think, to the sort of role I was in before with the cloud solution architecture one, because like as program managers and software engineers, you perhaps need to just know very specific things for one product. It can definitely help. So like for me, it did help in my program management internship because there's loads of cloud, and then like knowing cloud stuff really helps. Because then, like for example, if you have a solution architect in your team or software engineer, you're no longer limited to just talking about the like the Scrum sort of thing or like the DevOps thing. You can talk about the technical parts as well, and that's what I think. I was talking about before, like you can be flexible, like even if your name is this or your product manager, program manager, software engineer, you can sort of be flexible. If I, for example, talk to you about coding stuff, you're not gonna say, Salman, you're program manager, you can't do this. Like if I start, of course, if I say some random stuff, yes, but if I've learned the stuff, then it makes sense, and then it's like so it helps in that sense as well.
Okay. And is there any difference between interviews for program managers and software engineers? I assume there is, but if there is any particular difference in the interviews or style of interviews?
So so particularly, I would say that program managers, you're perhaps expected more to be able to think through the customer journey a lot. So the whole idea of there's key. So the way I like to think about these interviews is like them having different axioms. Like so, what does a candidate who's a software engineer need? They perhaps need the technical ability. They need the ability to communicate and like say when they're stuck and talk through their thought process. They need to be able to write clean code. Have good time complexity and things. These perhaps aren't so as much as a focus for program managers. I perhaps don't really know as well because I'm not an interviewer. But I would think that for program management, they're perhaps not too concerned about having the best ability to be like a coder. But you can still definitely be asked coding stuff. I think it definitely comes down to what sort of team you go on to. Like if you're going into more of a technical team, then perhaps, you know, they might expect more of a technical candidate. Because, for example, if they wanted you to start thinking about, you know, the future of a product, which is for a product for engineers or developers, like it sort of helps if someone has more of a technical footing, I think. But if someone's perhaps going into more of the ideation program manager sort of role, then it's perhaps more of a less focus. No, it's less of a focus, if that makes sense. So the axioms, I would say, is like the you know, can they think through customer segmentation? And there's loads of people who will give these so the interview prep advice normally for program management is to be able to come up with an idea for a product. So not just being able to delete code and stuff, which is definitely something I think program managers should still prep for, but being able to think through, okay, so if I was to ask you, let's create a new watch, right? The typical thing, right? A trip up some people might have is thinking, okay, well, if I was creating a new watch, what would I like in a new watch? I would like it to do this, I would like it to do that. Well, the best thing I think to do in that situation is to actually think about, okay, who is it, not me, but what is the demand like? Okay, for example, or what customer segment am I going to choose? Is it going to be someone who's blind, someone who's hard of hearing? Is it going to be children? Is it going to be kids? Focusing on one specific, and then being like, okay, so I'm going to choose to design a watch for someone who's blind. And then from there, it's okay, what are the pain points for someone who's blind when they have a watch? Is it that, you know, because they're blind, they can't see it, so they need to have tactile feedback on the watch? A lot of these watches nowadays are just glass screens and you can't really, you know, feel the time and stuff. So perhaps it needs also speech to text. That could be another solution. Another solution could be braille and stuff, or it could be like connects to your phone and then always reads alerts out. So like you then have all these different like solutions, and then it's like, okay, which one do you choose? And then the way I would like to do this is like by ranking it in a table and saying, okay, this is the cost to market, this how long it would take, this is the effectiveness, this is the customer satisfaction, so CSAT, or that's like one of the metrics PMs can use, I guess, for products. And then, okay, how do you get it to market? Are you going to deliver it through cold emails? Are you going to have like, is it going to be a service on the side? How are you going to get new people in? How are you going to track if it does well? Because these are things like as a PM you perhaps need to think about. It's like, okay, sometimes it's like, okay, yes, you put out a product, but sometimes it needs to stop. So you have a Windows Phone, for example, it was being pushed out and everything. Eventually it stopped. And when do you know when it's right to cut it? Do you measure the acquisition? Do you measure the retention? Do you measure the amount of people who share it and then referred people choose to go in, and things like this? So there's loads of different strategies. There's loads of different ways to go about these PM interviews, and there's loads of books out there like cracking the PM interview, so similar to cracking this software engineering coding interview. There's loads of advice there, which alongside the leak code stuff, there's that stuff too. Yeah, I think if you've prepared for software engineering internships, doing this stuff on top is it won't be that much of a challenge.
I totally agree. Like, you beautifully explained the whole domain of program managing and how to approach that. So my last question would be, any tips or advice for students who want to follow your path, and any big tips or big mistakes do you want them to avoid, or anything like that?
Yes, well, this is a deep question. So okay, and I've realized I've just said your middle name when I'm answering that. Not intentional, but so okay, so for my path, I was sort of thinking about this the other day. I was saying to someone, I'm not sure if I would ever wish my path upon someone else, because it's been such a strange uni journey for me, because I went to one uni, switched into another, so I had a whole new cohort. Then I did a placement year, whole new cohort of people in the placement year now. And then because I did a placement year, now I'm going to the students from the year before. So again, whole new cohort. So in that sense, I perhaps, because it's COVID as well, it's hard to like meet people. It's perhaps not the best journey I would wish for people. But in terms of career things, I think getting your foot in the door into the industry, whatever company, just as early as possible is good, because whether this be through open source or startup, starting something, then you have sort of leverage for being able to get into these perhaps more desirable things that you want to get into. Not everyone does want to get into these companies, but if you do, then starting as early as possible, because like in the summer, right, if you're a first year student or fresher, by the time your summer's over, you perhaps already will be going to interviews again for second year. And if you have something already on your resume, then it helps. And it makes you stand out. So I'd say if you are a fresher, then do that. If you're not, if you're like in final year and stuff, still, I would say try to do. This is something I think I'm glad I necessarily don't have to do so much anymore, because I can focus more on my final year and other things. But try to do open source or like create a personal brand. Yes, that will be my I think my message for people, to create a personal brand. And it's especially in the digital age. So this means, this doesn't mean like creating a whole YouTube channel and a whole like Twitter thing and becoming a LinkedIn influencer. I mean just like putting yourself out there so that people like will be able to come to you if they have questions. Like if someone looks you up in like when you've applied, you have something which is publicly facing, which says, okay, whether this be your personal website, whether this be a couple of your projects, have something which is visible, because that's something, even if we have jobs, that's something we still I think should have as well. So like doing it early is good as well, because eventually you might not have the time.
Makes sense.
I don't know, what else could I say?
I think having a personal brand so surely helps in the long run as well, and obviously in getting your foot in the industry, it does help. So yeah, I think thanks a lot, Salman, again for coming to our channel and sharing your insights, and I hope the best to you.
Thank you, Jovan, and a pleasure to be here, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.